And really just sort of admitting like right now in this moment, I'm fine. Right now in this moment, I'm good. There's this expression I heard in a meditation class of as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan. A few words spring to mind when I think of my chat with Seth. Delightful, honest, genuine, raw, beautiful, and empowering. Seth is an authentic and deep-thinking soul, and it was really a joy getting to know him and listening to his many insights. So let's get into it and officially introduce today's guest. Seth Morris is an actor, writer, producer, and director. You may know Seth from his roles on Curb Your Enthusiasm, Veep, Happy Endings, or his numerous appearances on the Comedy Bang Bang podcast. He currently voices Greg and other characters on Big Mouth, and I'm just skimming his resume now, and it's crazy. Some of his many credits include The League, Close Enough, The Big Leap, Parks and Recreation, Modern Family, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Children's Hospital, The Dictator, Do You Want to See a Dead Body, Superstore, Kroll Show, Workaholics, Step Brothers, The Hot Wives of Orlando, Cedar Rapids, Bajillion Properties, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. As you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we talk about his busted teeth, playing Bob Ducca, the stories we tell ourselves, acting and auditions, anger, flow state, improv and comedy, rejection, moving forward, and improvising with Sascha Baron Cohen. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. Ready to go?
Yeah, ready.
Maybe we should start with the obvious, and you can talk about what happened to your teeth.
Okay, so I have these 4 veneers in the front of my face, in my 4 front teeth. And it was one of those things that it was like maybe 5% Hollywood vanity that I got them, but the rest I needed them because they were all fucked up. Yeah. And they last for about 10 years, right? And that was about 10 years ago that I got them. This is a long, convoluted story. I went into the dentist maybe Monday or something to get one of those cavities filled, not realizing they're going to have to replace that veneer. And I had this whole thing of like, well, I don't want it to look like as white as it did 10 years ago. That's going to look weird. I've aged. I want to. So I had to make this split decision of like, okay, we're going to replace all 4 right now. So I was supposed to be at the dentist for an hour. I was there for 3.5 hours. It was like, wow, just gross. 2 sets of hands in my mouth, ripping all the teeth out really quickly. And then they put these temporary ones on, and you're supposed to be careful what you eat. And tonight I had this sandwich with a baguette. And even before I told my wife, I'm like, I should be careful with this for the sandwich because of my teeth. I'll be careful.
Straight away.
Crunch.
Wow.
And it's this gross. What they do when they put on veneers is they whittle down. It's really gross. But they shave down the teeth. It looks like little baby teeth. So it's like, I don't know if you can see.
Sort of, but I'm definitely taking.
But it looks like little itty bitty baby teeth in the middle of my face. So these 2 fell, and it was funny because we were at dinner and my wife was like, oh my God. I'm like, it doesn't hurt. And I spit out the teeth fragments, and then I smiled at her And my son burst out laughing and was clapping like he loved it. He thought it was hilarious.
That's hilarious. I'm glad that he could laugh, but
Yeah.
from an acting side, because I've heard you talk about this before, like your look is important. Does it scare you from the acting side that you might not be able to? I think you've got a new character here. I think you can work with it.
Dude, I'll tell you, it's funny. I get excited about that because I like playing weirdos and
Nice.
I think I'm always going like, oh, this is better for comedy. Like
I love that.
right now I have a mustache and I like to have, when I'm balding and I like to kind of grow my hair out so it looks like gross 70s undercover cop. And, my wife was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I think it's funnier. But then, you're always, you do always kind of wrestle with the vanity of like, certain things do legitimately look ugly, And so I would never keep it like this because this is just too much. But when they gave me these temporary veneers, they were very weird looking. Like one of them was a little snaggletooth. There was a little too long, but I liked it because, I think the next day or something, I got an audition for, a porn guy, or like a porn director. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is perfect.
Perfect timing.
So I love to play around with how I look, and the weirder, the better. I never know if it actually works. I can never say that like, oh, because I, had this weird look, I got this part, but I always get excited about it.
I think that's all that matters. People feel the excitement. And I love that it's all for comedy. That is so great. I'm sure it's at your wife's expense, but that's brilliant.
Oh yeah. I mean, it'd be nice to get laid every once in a while, but it's,
I understand.
If you look funny, you got to do it.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
I had a guest who, very long story short, he wasn't booking auditions, or he's a brilliant actor, but he shaved his hair into a buzz cut. And as soon as he shaved his hair into a buzz cut, he just kept on booking. And he's still the same actor. He's still the same person. He booked he was a main cast member of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And he credits his hair. And so I
think that's true. I have a friend who, same thing. He grew a big bushy beard, and he's a good looking guy, and his manager was like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And he's wildly successful as a bearded weirdo. And it's like, as a struggling actor, you're always kind of looking for, is that the thing? Is that the thing? And I'll admit that I've been like, well, what's my little thing going to be?
Yeah, of course.
And, I haven't found it yet, but it is, like I said, it's fun to play around with.
Well, you have played many different characters, one in the improv world, but you've also played a character, Bob Ducca, which is really popular in the world. So I think you have found your thing. You've played
I think you're right, actually. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I started doing Bob Ducca a long time ago now, probably, 12 years ago, could have been longer. And I immediately, people liked it right away, which was super great. But nice. I was like, I felt that sort of thing of like, oh, this could be my thing. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to. Why does everything have to be like, this is now my marketable whatever? And I also got scared, I think, of the idea of, oh, what if this is all you ever do? Like, I don't know if you remember, in America, there was this, this is going back a ways, but there was this guy on commercials who was a redneck, and he'd always say, his whole thing was like, you know what I'm talking about, Vern? And he had this whole, it was like one of these comedians who had this character, used it on some commercial, became huge, and then they ended up making a movie out of this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't want to be like that guy. And then after the years go by and you're not getting work or whatever, you're like, I'd love to be that guy. Yeah. But now I've been doing Bob Ducca again, and I just love it. I'm like, if this is my thing, great. Like, few people get a thing, and I have a different sort of take on it. Like it people enjoy it so much and seem to identify with it so much, but it's easily the silliest, dumbest thing that I've done. But in a way, it's like, well, of course, why not? Why shouldn't the easiest, silliest thing be the one that sticks?
Agreed. People resonate with that stuff as well. It doesn't need to be the most sophisticated. There's so many elements from what I've seen as well that it's just like people love to watch it.
Sure.
And sometimes in society, we want the character to be like a Walt from Breaking Bad. But from my perspective, Bob Ducca it's hilarious. There's so much there and so much to experience, but also you get to play and have fun with that character as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. And it's also, you know, you can do anything with anything really. So you can put a lot through. Once people like that thing or that character, you can filter a lot through it, I think, you know.
Isn't that cool though, that after, I forget how long you said, but like roughly 10 years ago, you did this character and people still talk about it and it's still, I think that's just wild. I think that's huge credit to you.
Oh, thank you. And you know, in terms of the sort of subject matter of the podcast, is Bob Ducca is this really depressed, hypochondriac guy. And I think it's interesting that that's what people gravitate to, because, you know, who can't relate to that kind of thing, you know?
Definitely.
Certainly, I think people that are comedians are gravitated to comedy, or the kind of comedy that we do. It's, you know, the not getting too grandiose, but like everybody's got that inner Bob Ducca, inner hypochondriac kind of, you know, it's a very, that negative inner voice, that sort of depressed inner voice, just personified. And it's the closest thing to me that I've ever done.
Oh, interesting.
It's not a stretch at all.
I've heard you talk about that in one podcast that I heard. You spoke about being negative, but I've heard you in all the podcasts you've done. You come across actually very positive in the way that you speak about your life. I was very surprised to hear that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I was actually just talking to my therapist about this. I was like, everybody thinks I'm super mellow, and you know, I'm from California, Northern California, and I think I'm. And I was telling her, kind of kidding, kind of serious, like, part of the reason I'm mellow is because I don't give a shit. I don't think much matters, you know. I don't believe in God. But I'm not a nihilist. I sort of feel like it's up to us to create the meaning, and if you can be good, why wouldn't you? Because it's better and it feels better. But I don't think that, you know, there's plenty of bad people that get away with it and they never face any consequences. You know, I think we like to tell ourselves that, oh, well, they're going to get their karma, they're going to get their, but sometimes, but maybe a lot of times not. And I do feel like, you know, everybody's suffering to an extent, and everybody's kind of trying to do their best to get by and get along. But hardly, I don't know, the way that our world is built, it's you kind of can't admit that, you know, you can't, you know, it's to be like the joke of, if you answered honestly to how you doing today, you can't just, well, really, you know, nothing would ever get done. But I do think it's interesting. I think I'm sort of a positive, benevolent nihilist, you know.
Interesting. You could still what I'm hearing is that, like, to me, this is the most important thing, like religion or no religion, God or no God, that you still want to do right by people. And, you know, you're talking about finding your own meaning. And I think that's also really important. That's like, whether you believe in God or not, that doesn't make you a positive person. So still what I'm hearing is that you're like positive and you try to do what's right for you and the people in your environment.
Well, I also think it works, you know what I mean? I think it proves itself true that, you know, it feels good to do good, and it feels good to receive good. And it's one of those things that if you're honest, I feel like you kind of have to admit that it's a better way. You know,
we've had a lot of people on this podcast that have gone through the AA program for alcohol and maybe drugs and other stuff. And why I'm so inspired by these stories is that it's one thing to actually admit that something's going on, but then to actually do something about it. But from what I've interviewed from everyone on the podcast and also off the podcast, they say that when their life's of service, I know that can sound a bit religion-y, but when they feel like they're giving back to people and they're telling them their story or they're trying to help people, they feel so much better. And that's also a part of what they feel is their purpose, but more so they feel that by them talking about their story or them trying to help someone, that fulfills them and they feel great. And I think that's just amazing, because we could just hold that all in and not actually want to go to that one step. And that's actually when you talk about helping your environment as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Like, I think entertainment is such a selfish endeavor. It's a very self-concerned thing. You're constantly worried about yourself in a way that everybody's kind of. I get really in the last couple of years into the idea of your life as storytelling, and people's lives as they're telling themselves this story all the time.
Yeah.
So like an example I see a lot is you'll see somebody who's telling you about how hard their life is, or how somebody was rude to them, let's say, and you were there and you're like, I didn't see that. But they're just in their own thing, and for whatever reason, their history, that's the story. So everybody's telling themselves a story, and most of the time the story they're telling themselves is, I'm being fucked over, people are trying to, I have a harder time than other people, I'm a fraud, I'm a whatever. And it's this really kind of insular, hidden away kind of existence. And again, I think everybody feels this, is prone to this, but there's particular things about being in the entertainment business that really, accentuate those.
Interesting.
And breaking out of yourself and making the story not just about you is like, it's such a relief. I mean, this is the shorthand of it. It's not a reason to have kids, but when you have kids, it's I heard it described as, when you have kids, it's like you find a room to your house that you didn't know was there, this whole other part of you. And I feel like that's just another way of saying you're connected. And like the simplest little thing, it's you can feel it. It's like a little bit of a lightning of the load when you do something nice for somebody, or and I was thinking of this the other day. It's like, sometimes I don't know if I'm nice because I want to be nice, or I want to be nice.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
And ultimately, maybe it doesn't matter, but like, it's this little thing that, I think it's one of these little voices that you can listen to over the multitude, but like, keep going in this direction, keep going in this direction. And, I say that, I guess you're referring to before as negative. I spend chunks of my day being like, fuck, goddamn, oh, now this, whether I'm actually in traffic or not, that same sort of attitude of like, God damn, I'm trying to get it from point A to point B, and the dog won't let me. So I think that's why I'm in tune with my anger. And I used to sort of not trust people who weren't angry, and I still kind of don't. Like, if I've known somebody for a while and I've never heard them complain about anything or whatever, I'm going, it's like, what? Like, what? Come on, really? And you have to be careful, because sometimes you can just, drag people down with you or whatever. But I don't know. I guess I kind of wrestle with that of, I do want to be positive. I like being positive, but I don't like it when people don't admit that things are fucked.
Yeah. It's a really interesting balance, because obviously there's a lot going on in the world, and the vast majority is completely outside of our control, but we want to fight the fight. And I might have the wrong attitude is, I can only control what I can control. I'm trying to do the best that I can do. But at the same time, does that mean I get angry? Of course. Do I say things that I regret? Of course. But even that reminder, which is really interesting, because I haven't spoken about this before, of, am I trying to like do good for good's sake? I don't think it matters, but it's a constant reminder that it's still there to try and be good or try and be positive, because as you said, it kind of changes the whole atmosphere of ourselves, but also environment. Like you talked about your kid. If you feel great when you're helping your kid, and it's the same in the world. When you help someone, even when you're not in the best frame of mind, that helps, and it builds up and it builds up.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's like, well, to talk about the AA thing, that phrase, fake it till you make it, like, you don't have to necessarily mean it all the time, you know, whatever you're trying to do. It's sort of whatever kind of change you're trying to make, it's still filtered through who you are, you know, at your core.
Yes.
So, you know, it's almost like, you know, those Play-Doh shapes where you can squish it through and it's a star, and like, you're still the Play-Doh, you're still blue Play-Doh, but maybe it's pushed through, oh, dare I say, a heart shape. I
love it.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know, like, they went through Mother Teresa's journals toward the end, and she didn't believe in God, and she was like, what am I even doing? This is all bullshit, whatever. But
really?
you know, she still helped a bunch of people.
Yeah. I don't think, like, and I feel very unqualified to say that, I don't think that really matters. It's just about, like, kind of who we are, what we want to kind of leave to the world, and, you know, actions speak louder than words, in a sense.
Yeah, well, that's what made me think of that idea of action when you're talking about people that, you know, try to change, you know, make things better for themselves and others through sobriety or 12-step program, is that idea of action. You know, taking these little steps, because it's hard. Life is hard. You know, it's I do think it's interesting, because I think life is really, really hard, but I also feel like most of us are fine, but we don't know it. You know what I mean? Like, most of us that aren't in a war zone, and most of us in the Western world are, man, light years ahead of our ancestors were, or however you want to look at it. But, and I'm not saying that's not to say you can't complain about hardships in your life, but it's, I don't know, it's one of those sort of fundamental, two opposing ideas that bump into each other. They're both true. Life is really fucking hard, man. It's like, it's tough to get through this world day to day, day by day. And at the same time, most of us are fine.
I actually think that's brilliant. And I know that you're a big advocate for play and fun. And this is one of the many reasons that I wanted to talk to you. But for example, yes, there's a lot going on in the world. There's also, in my mind, if we really sit back, there's way more positives than negatives. We just focus on the negatives. But for example, when you're doing something like improv, or you're acting or whatever, in that moment, hopefully, more times than not, you're playing and having fun, and you're not thinking about what's going on in the world. And it's brilliant. It is consuming, and you forget about your little reality, and that's the best feeling in the world. So yes, there's still things going on, but in that moment, you're having the best time of your life. Do you ever think about it like that?
I mean, I know that's why I like improv so much, and it's you know, it's a flow state. Exactly. This was years ago in the early 90s at UCB. Just, there was not a huge thing, but there was a couple of books that were going around, people talking about. One of them was called Flow, and it's about that idea of flow states where you're just, every part of you is engaged. You're thinking, you're physically, and it could be ballet. So it could be, it's a lot of times it's a physical thing. Yeah. But it's when you are in the zone, and athletes get it, you know, you could get it from writing, you can get it from doing math, whatever, but you're just so engaged that kind of time disappears. And that's, you know, I was lucky to find the thing that put me in that flow state. And when you're in it, like anything else, stand up or whatever, you're just so fully engaged with your world, with the environment, that, you know, you kind of, stuff goes away, you know, the noise goes away, and you get a high from it, you know. And it's really about being in the moment. And it's, I guess it's easier, I guess, maybe if you have all these components, the physical, the mental, the this and that, all happening at once. Man, if you can find it, you're lucky, you know.
I want to
But
correct.
yeah, it's
I want to correct you on it was luck for you, because I don't think it was luck for you, and we'll get into it. You've tried so many different things in your life, and you really were, and that was through you searching and wanting to, I don't know, you correct my wording, maybe live a better life or just try and find out what, inverted commas, your purpose was. But you really took some time to find it in the scheme of your life. And then once you found it, then you became like a master or a guru at it. So I wouldn't call it luck. You put in a lot of work to actually do that. Yeah, there may be situations. Yeah, go on.
No, say thank you for saying that. It's interesting. I always loved acting and loved comedy. Even I didn't know long form improv, but improv was always, when I do improv exercises and drama classes when I was a kid, that was what I always liked the best, was the best at. And I kind of went away from that and pursued other things, thinking that a life doing that kind of comedy and that kind of stuff wouldn't be as meaningful or helpful or whatever. And I think I'm lucky in that I do have an affinity for it, for comedy and for improv specifically. But I for sure tried a bunch of other stuff, man. I took a lot of detours, and I for sure put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what is that? People could spend forever trying to find that perfect alchemy. I mean, luck is for sure part of things, I think, and I guess that's it. The combo of luck and hard work and timing.
Yes, perfect.
It's a
beautiful mix combo.
Yeah. I mean, you must get that too, right? With stand up. You're primarily stand up, right?
No, I actually writer now. I have done stand up, but I would say screenwriting is now, and podcasts. And I get it from
same thing. Yeah,
I get it from screenwriting, and it is profound.
Even
I do
kind of go away. Yeah.
With it's actually crazy. I've done improv. I've only done improv classes, but I still think it's the most amazing thing in the world. But in those, even if it's not good, the moments I call it like pure presence, and you just feel like unstoppable, but in like and I apologize for the wording, but of pure love. Like you're working with someone, and with the right intentions, you're there to create something beautiful, and you feel incredible. I play basketball as well, and by no means am I good. And I also want to hear about your basketball experience, but by no means am I a good basketball player. But in those moments where you just take a shot or you do a move, you're like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. You just feel unbelievable. But it's not an ego thing. It's kind of a reminder that we can kind of do like greater things when we're in like alignment or we're really grounded. Screenwriting, when I'm in the zone and writing, it's just like this pure, something's taken over you and you just feel amazing. You're like, wow, I did that. So I'd love to hear your experience actually with that.
Well, I mean, it comes and goes. I feel like there's a couple different kinds. There's those kinds, and I'm sure you could relate to this, where you have an idea, let's say, and it's just, you're locked in from the get-go, and it's like one pass and you have this sketch or you have this whatever done, and it's like, oh, this is amazing. And that's its own kind of thrill and satisfaction. And then there's the stuff where you're like working on it and it doesn't work and you're just trying, and then finally it kind of breaks. That one might even be better. I mean, because it's even a more of a release of tension where it just, aha, we did it, we found it, boom, and then you go, and it's interesting. Like I was talking to on another podcast, but with improvisers, and a friend that I kind of started out with, John Gemberling, who's hilarious, was talking about improv as, I don't know how great it was for us in the long run, in the sense that it is such an immediate satisfaction, and it's easy to do, in the sense of like, you just show up and you do it and you go, and it can make the quote unquote real world of entertainment harder, when you have to memorize lines, when you have to sit down and write, when you have to do these do more of the grunt work. And, you know, the skills, I was thinking the other day, like my hard work, a lot of my hard work with improv was just doing it over and over again. So you practicing, even like, I don't feel like going into the city and improvising tonight. I don't, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I want to do it even if I don't feel like it, or even if I don't have an idea. I'm going to go out there so I can know how to deal with panicking and not knowing what to say or whatever. But that's different than, you know, memorizing a monologue or researching for. It's a different kind of hard work, you know. And like I said, I've talked to some other improvisers where, you know, you develop this specific set of skills, and when you're rewarded for it, luckily there's this, I kind of came up in an era where that was appreciated, and some of those people started making shows, and they're, you know, they hire you, they're like, okay, we'll get one on script and then we're going to go for it. But that's not always the case. So it's interesting. I wouldn't trade it for anything, you know, but and in a way and sometimes I feel sort of lost when I think of, oh man, I wish I had studied dramatic acting earlier. But in a way, and you're catching me at a very positive time, the way I'm looking at it now is like, oh, this is a new thing that I get to work on now. You know what I mean? It's like a set of skills I can work on now and develop now. On my off days, I'm sort of like, Jesus, I'm too old to learn Shakespeare, or it's to try to start over and work on this. But yeah, it's all the different little kinds of ways where you get caught up in a thing, especially creatively, is, man, I mean, it's great. It's amazing.
Oh, that's okay. That's beautiful. And I want to nitpick a few points here, but also in terms of like studying like Shakespeare. I'm no actor, so I can't give acting advice, but just, which we'll get into quite shortly, life experience plays a massive role. And you've had quite the life experience of doing various different things, but also, please correct me if I'm wrong, improv would also massively help your acting. Yes, we'll get into the difference between acting and improv, but that's still getting you on stage. It's making you feel confident, getting you in the zone, all of these different things. And I just want to say something, because I can see you thinking. In terms of hard work, I think it's important that people realize, because people think an improviser might just get up once and they're amazing, that's it. You know, you're getting up heaps. You mentioned you're performing when you don't want to perform. You're doing teaching, which would improve your craft. You're spending a lot of time. You might be reading books. You might be discussing things. You're probably getting lessons from other people. There's so much work involved, and then you become like the master. It didn't just happen like that. I just wanted to.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm someone too who I feel like I have this thing in me, and I don't know, maybe this is puritanical or whatever, but it's like, if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. Like if I'm not suffering through it, how could I, you know, that's why I went away from acting for so long. When it came time, I took a long time to get through college, and kept sort of changing my mind about what would be important and helpful and things like that. And it's kind of like the Bob Ducca things. Like, I can't do the easy thing, you know, what good is that? So I really liked geology, and was going to become a geology major, just to pursue it. Kind of in the back of my mind, I always thought that I would go to acting, but I wanted to sort of prove to myself that I could do it. And part of that would be like taking the chemistry and the physics and this and that. And I had a moment where I kind of had this revelation, like, what am I doing? I don't want to take physics. I don't want to do this stuff. This is what I actually want to do. Fuck it, you know, just do it. And so I really admire, I think that's tough. I'm guessing I'm not alone in that kind of whatever second guessing, but people who can just sort of like, no, this is what I like. This is the easy path. Like, I remember, I'm terrible at math, but I remember when some math tutor talked about shortcuts, and talked about people that are good at math good at math will take shortcuts. They don't do it the hard way. They are looking for the simpler path. And I was kind of blown away by that. I thought that was the whole point, was that it was hard, you know?
I see it as a trick, and I know exactly what you're thinking. And also, I barely know anyone in my entire world that knew when they were born, this is what I want to do, and they just went straight through that path. I call this a trick, and about doing the hard thing, because I used to be an accountant. I put all of this stuff to the side. I'm like, I have to be an accountant. I have to prove to myself and the world that I'm a serious person. This is what people do to be successful. And if it's for you, then it's for you. No judgment there. But I had a very similar mentality of we had to go through the hard yards. But then when you find something that's a lot easier for you, I also had that little mindset where you have to do the hard thing. But I see it as a trick. It's because we don't have conversations like these, or we don't see people talk about the hardships to get to that point where it's a bit easier. But I definitely think that, yes, I said it's a trick, but we can pursue the thing that's easy. And then it makes life hopefully easier for us, or in moments of clarity or love or whatever you want to put it. But it's a trick. And that's my conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's, as I get older, I'm about to turn 52, and I'm more comfortable with saying, no, this is what I want to do.
Nice.
Because I do think that I benefited a lot from, this is going to sound weird, but I benefited a lot from being too hard on myself and doubting myself, in that it made me push myself for the things that I felt like I should be doing. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I should be reading these kind of books. And, you know, I might want to just sit down and read detective noir or read whatever, but I'm going to force myself to read this, you know, more something from the literary canon. And sometimes I'd enjoyed those, sometimes I didn't, but I have to think that I benefited somehow from pursuing something that wasn't the immediate, you know, I went for the vegetables and not just the cookies. But now I'm sort of like this point of like, that's okay, I'm going to do the cookies.
Nice. Can I add to that? It's interesting how like hardships like lead to your personal greatness, which I think is actually a good word now that I've said it out loud. But I know, like, from a screenwriting perspective, when I'm starting, I'm a terrible screenwriter. I'm showing stuff that's crap, but I forced myself to read scripts or read a script that I didn't like. But I wouldn't say that was necessarily being hard on myself. I just knew at some level that this would help me become better, because we do somewhat live in a culture where we're kind of told you just do the thing and you're good at it. But going back to improv, and I think this is a really key point, like practicing or performing when you don't want to, that's where you get better at something. And you need to people need to be intuitive and realize, is this real? Is it me being lazy? But I think that's one of the key components I found from this podcast, is doing things when you can't be bothered can actually lead to great results.
Well, I think that's something that I really admire about writers too, is I feel like for most writers, that's a big part of it, is a lot of them hate it. You know, it's tough to chain yourself down there and be alone all day. And, you know, that's kind of goes back to what I was saying as an improviser. I got rewarded for like, I'm playing, I'm with people, and then you sit down and it's like, oh God, I'm here all by myself. And it takes some practice to get there. But the discipline that artists like writers and, you know, painters or people that I dated this woman that was a painter one time. And she was successful, you know, and I remember when she sort of said, she talked about how I was like, sometimes it's work. Sometimes I approach it as like it's work. And I'm embarrassed to admit for how long I just assume like you have to be overcome with inspiration, and, you know, and I feel like there's a we like that myth of that person that can effortlessly do the thing, you know. It gets thrown around in comedy a lot too, like, oh, that person's a genius, that person. I'm like, are they, or are they lucky and they work really hard? You know, I do think luck plays a lot of it, whatever you want to call it, that random, because there's so many people, I'm sure you know of this, that are as funny or funnier than the most successful X, Y, or Z. And, some of them maybe are their own worst enemy, but some of them it just doesn't happen. It just, the hand they're dealt, the circumstances, that's what I mean. Where like nothing matters. I don't think that the universe is conspiring for or against you. It just kind of is. And like, it's, there's plenty of, of amazing people who just don't, it doesn't happen for, and it's sometimes that's sort of tough. Cause I think, again, with the arts, with the, there's so much sort of hope and faith involved, and you kind of are it's a nebulous thing. So you're kind of putting yourself out there. That becomes its own kind of mechanical strategy, in the same way of like, I have to work hard, but I also have to believe, and I have to, the truth is like, nobody there's
knows.
just as much randomness to the good things as the bad things, so let's say some horrible thing, some car accident kills some innocent person. That's just a thing that happened. The universe is impersonal.
I think my wording might mean that we differ, but I think we actually are on the same page. But one thing that I've realized, that this is through my experience, I'm not telling anyone what belief systems they should have, but the mindset, especially through these conversations, it's the mindset that matters, regardless if one believes in the universe or not. With working on ourselves or putting ourselves in the best position to succeed doesn't mean like being the funniest person, but it means looking at some of these, what I call like negative programs or programs, self-limiting programs, which I'm sure you've discussed in therapy, that put us in a better position. And so which you outlined at the start, if we've got a mindset where I'm doomed, I'm going to fail, nothing's ever going to work, we're going to see the world in that lens. And so people can perceive that as universe or whatever they want. But I can't just sit here on my high horse and say, get a great mindset, everything will work out well, but it'll certainly put one in a better position to succeed. Doesn't mean that success is guaranteed. No.
Right.
That's my little,
right.
That's my little.
Well, at the very least, you'll probably, suffer less. You'll be happier, even if you're not, even if that specific success you're going for isn't achieved. If you have a positive outlook, you're probably going to be happier and suffer less along the road.
And actually, on that, and I'd love to know your take on this. Whenever I've achieved for success, and I never get the result of what I thought I wanted the success to be, the success happens in another way. I know that was a bit convoluted, but I'll just give an example that I brought up 100 times. I just can't think of a better example. First script I wrote, I was very lucky, and it was a garbage. It's not me being negative. It was a very bad script. First thing I've ever written. I have no writing experience. Not the most talented writer, but I put in a lot of work to be better since. And I got a meeting with a lady who's pretty much, she's like the go-between between Netflix, and she's the big comedy producer in Australia. And she took the meeting and said, this script, we're not going to do anything with this script. And I was like devastated, because I thought, I've written a script, I've worked so hard, why don't I have a Netflix deal? But then I realized, she gave me some very good advice, like you need to be doing this for a long time, you need to constantly be writing, or you need to be constantly working at it. Anyway. And I thought at the time I had failed. I'm never going to be a screenwriter, blah, 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 woe is me. But now I look back at it, I'm like, that was the greatest success that I had at that stage in my life, because it forced me to be a better writer. It forced me to look at like characters and structures and to work harder. And it also gave me the confidence that I got in the room with the first thing I've ever written. And so although I didn't get my success, that inverted commas failure, which I don't think it was a failure, pushed me in a much better direction. So I'm wondering, do you have a similar perspective, or do you completely disagree? What's your take on?
No, I think I agree, but it's a lot of times that stuff, that kind of insight only comes after the fact, in hindsight.
Yeah, much later.
Which would be a little weird. Again, getting back to that person who'd be like, if I knew you at the time and you're like, this is great, she told me no, and it's a really great gift, I'd be like, who is this fucking guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's one of these things that well, let me just make sure I answer your question. Yeah, I think it's, it's how you define success, I would even get back up even further is like, you finish a screenplay. That's huge.
Yep, that's
That in and of itself, that's a big deal. It's hard to tell yourself these things and be your own kind of best friend in that regard. But what it makes me think of is specifically for acting, but I think for other stuff is it's a weird thing because you have to both be in it and be passionate about it and take it really seriously and take it to heart in a very personal way. But at the same time, you have to be able to back away and say, not this time. This is part of the learning process. In other words, you have to both hold it real tight to your heart, but also hold on to it loosely, which is a really tough trick,
Balancing act.
It's a really tough balancing act because, with auditions or whatever, you have to work really hard at it and kind of admit, man, this would be great. I'd be good at this. This would be good for me financially. And I think I could really make this better and all that stuff. But at the same time, you have to be able to do it and then go, I'm going to not think about this anymore. That's not easy. That's with all these sort of pursuits, you pour your heart out into a screenplay and it's like, especially if maybe you're drawing from your own life or whatever. And most things don't, on the creative side, they don't come to fruition. I have friends that I really admire who are great about just like, it's just, you just keep plugging away. You just keep plugging away. And, as an artist, you're called on to give it your all, but to survive and to just be sort of sane and realistic, you can't hold on to it for too long or too tightly, and it's, yep. I wrestle with that all the time, Yeah.
I think that you would actually be really fantastic at that because just looking at, I'm not trying to suck up to you, and I genuinely mean this. You have an incredible resume. This is a comedy. Anyone in comedy would love to do even like a 10th of what you've done. But at the same time, you've probably been rejected 1,000 more times than the jobs that you've gotten. And that would be really tough. And I'm sure in the moment you might play the negative game because you're getting rejected so many times. But then I hope that you can look at your resume and be like, oh yeah, I did that stuff. But that's also can be really tough as well because you're getting rejected, but then you get that one thing and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes me think of two things. One is when they said, can you put a little bio together, for the show, like rattle off these credits, and it reminds me like, oh yeah, it's cool. I've done some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I had the same feeling when I used to apply for coffee shops or job, whatever, quote unquote real jobs. You start to feel like, oh fuck, how am I gonna, I can't work here. And then you put a resume together, which, some of it's bullshit because you're like, whatever, you were a dog walker. You're like, I was a facilities manager at this private residence or whatever. But you put it out on paper, you're like, oh, not too bad. I have done some stuff. So it's kind of nice to like look at your resume. But it's one of those things again. It's I'm always sort of playing catch up with myself because the life of most character actors is you're usually not working. For the most part, you're not working more often than you're working. Yep. And it's a weird thing in that, let's say people go, man, I see you all over. And maybe you shot those things a year ago. So that's, 24 hours a day for 365 days when you haven't done anything. And you're just, again, you're telling yourself that story. You're in there. And some of it's real. You're like, oh man, the bills are piling up. And you see people around you. That's why I kind of stay off of social media. It's not good for me. The comparison part of it.
Definitely. But
then, it's designed to make you feel bad. But the other thing, I might have lost. I'm like coming around the turn, and I think I lost my thought.
Yeah.
No, I think that's it. If I remember it, I'll shout it out.
No, I think it's actually really important, and everyone has an experience. Like even when I was applying for accounting roles, like I don't even know how many years ago, I was like, oh, I've done that stuff. That's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. And it can kind of like put you back to realize, because it's very
Yeah.
easy to just focus on the next thing and the next thing. And your industry seems to be, it's all about the next thing or what's going to be the next thing. And I'm wondering, you've obviously done a lot of work on yourself. How do you cope to bring it back to?
Um, I kind of, how do I cope? Kind of with whatever works, honestly, like therapy. I've done some 12-step type stuff. I've done some self-help stuff,
Oh, nice.
talking to other people. It's tough to get whatever the real perspective is. But I've also I feel like I've become more realistic and humble. And you kind of can't help but be humbled by life in general. And I do really feel like we're lucky to have the problems we do, almost all of us. You are, again, we're most of us are doing much better than we can find in ourselves to admit. But the things that's helped me in the last couple of years, meditation seems to help a lot.
Oh,
In
nice.
that it kind of buys me a little bit of time in terms of not spinning out into an anxiety or a depression or whatever. And really just sort of admitting, like, right now in this moment I'm fine. Right now in this moment I'm good. There's this expression I heard in a meditation class of, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you,
Oh,
which can be
brilliant.
kind of cheesy, but it's true. It's
Yeah,
like,
100%.
look, you're really, as an organism on the planet Earth, you're doing pretty great. You're not being chased by a predator. You're not being, you're not being, you're not under any kind of immediate threat. It's all, most of the time, existential stuff.
Yes.
It's all sort of abstract. We have a negativity bias. We have we evolved because we were worriers and fretters, and that stuff kept us alive. I'm not saying anything new, but that same
It's a nice reminder.
muscle that kept us on the lookout for predators on the savannah is still firing today, when you're like, not just like, oh, is that cop going to pull me over, but even more like, do they hate me? They hate me. They're thinking about the thing I said, and it's like, it served us well, but it doesn't so much anymore.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
I also want to add to, you are also a bit of a fitness junkie, or you've been into fitness for a long time, and that would also massively help. Why did you decide to, please correct if this is the right word, get better, or why did you decide to actually want to work on this? Because we do see people, go to drinking or give up or do certain things, and it sounds like you've actively decided that you actually want to be, and I hate this phrase, the best version of yourself, or attempt to be.
Well, I think it's like, the short answer is, I just didn't want to hurt anymore. I didn't want to suffer anymore. And I've dealt with depression, and I've dealt with anxiety. I've dealt with, arguably pretty, whatever. Everybody has hardships, but I've had some shitty things happen. But I've always been, again, I think I'm kind of lucky, because some people don't have this and they go down other paths of admitting, like, when I'm on an edge. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm like, okay, this is, whether it's my gut, whatever it is, of like, it makes me think of this phrase, like, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. If you're really honest with yourself, you when you're doing bad, when you shouldn't be hanging out here, when you and we can put a lot of stuff in between us and that little voice or that instinct. And I've taken plenty of detours in my life. I've done plenty of abused substances and gone down, engaged in things that were just kind of a waste of time. But that short answer is, I didn't want to hurt anymore. And I sort of logically felt like, I don't think it has to be like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it could be as simple as, what if I'm wrong of thinking that I'm the worst piece of shit in the world? You know what I mean? Like, this feels really real, but what if I was wrong? What if I did want to, I was having this conversation with my therapist the other day of things that, pursuing goals or things that feel impossible. A lot of times it's time management, but it can be bigger other things where just shit feels impossible. And on good days where I'll say to myself, it's like, okay, it is impossible. It can't be done. But if it could, how would I do that?
Ah, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's taking little actions. And one of the things that has got me out of funks, whether it's a serious sort of emotional funk or whatever, is taking action. Just even I had kind of a, not a spectacular, but a pretty decent breakdown 20 some years ago or something. And it was, which got me kind of started in therapy and, and,
you got it out the way. Everyone has one, at least one.
At least, Jesus. Yeah. And then, but it was just even that, taking the action of finding out, how do you get a therapist? So like doing that, like either I'm sure I talked to friends or I am lucky in that way of I can get into action mode when there's a thing going on, when there's when there's some bad shit going on for me, or, I heard this great phrase the other day. This songwriter was talking about his songs, and because he writes a lot about kind of people, on the outskirts and criminals and stuff. And he's like, well, desperate people make quick decisions.
Ah, interesting.
I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Which is, that kind of shit can be its own flow state, by the way. When you're under the gun.
Oh, bam.
Yeah. You kind of, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse, you act, you do shit. Hopefully you take care of shit, but sometimes, whatever it is. But yeah, I like that phrase, desperate people make quick decisions. And that I've pursued those, yeah.
No, huge credit to you. I used to study kinesiology many years ago, and they had a rule, and I never appreciated it because I'll expand in a second. Well, pretty much you had to call to make the appointment. Someone else couldn't make it for you, because that showed initiative and ownership that you were willing to go there. Yeah. It's very easy to get like a wife or a partner or someone else, and that's the first step in taking or moving in hopefully the right direction for oneself. And people underestimate, I'm so glad you brought it up, that just one step is actually doing something, and it builds. Sometimes the first step's the hardest. So that's really awesome that you could, one, that you could put it to words, but also you could recognize that as well. Yeah.
And it's true. Like, you just, again, if you're honest with yourself, it feels better. I could get into points where I have a really hard time with paperwork and bureaucracy, and I just kind of got fucked with my taxes, but by my own fault. And I put things off, and I don't want to deal with it. And that thing that when I do finally say, I'm going to make this call and do this thing, and I'm embarrassed because it's a question that I should know, but I don't know. There's always that sort of flood of endorphins of, I did it. I took the action. Yeah. I did it. The easier parallel is, I'm not handy at all. I can't fix shit, but
like me.
I remember a while ago, one of my headlight went out, and I just looked up, how do you change a headlight? And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. And it was a really simple thing, but the fact that I did it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a genius. I'm MacGyver. I can handle anything. I'm a mechanic. And I spent $11 and watched a YouTube video, but it felt great.
Sorry, one second. It's contagious. I think that's awesome because you get the rush from achieving a task, no matter how small or big. To me, that's a big task, but I think that's great.
Yeah.
In terms of, I might be jumping the gun here, but you've done improv for a long time. You've gone through the whole system, and you've become what people would call like the pro or the master at it. Would that help at making better decisions or making quicker decisions? Do you apply improv world into real world?
I think it helps in making quick decisions. I don't know about better decisions, honestly. I don't know. I'm certainly not as far along in my career. I don't feel successful a lot of the times. I mean, when I look at, I recognize that I've achieved a lot and I'm proud of the things that I've done, but I don't feel, I guess, contented or sort of settled a lot of the time. But I'm trying to think of it certainly for the quick decisions, maybe it sort of trains you to think a little bit more creatively or a little bit more outside the box, for better or worse. I mean, I get these things. It's kind of like going back to like, well, I like looking funny. I can't trace a direct job that I've gotten because I've said, I've done the audition in this looking this way, but that I think that being in comedy, being in improv, it inspires me to make that choice.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a more logical way to do it. I don't know. I just don't. I'm sure it has. How could it not? But I aside from the making quick decisions, in the moment, and I think like with parenting and other maybe chaotic situations, I think it's maybe easier for me because improv is its own kind of chaos, and like, okay, well, this is what's happening now, and this is we're going to go with this moment. The bigger, broader, more methodical decision making, I don't know.
I'm sure it does something to you in terms of like that flow state that you're able to achieve it or recognize it a bit more easily.
Yeah.
I do find this very interesting. I think this is important because, we spoke about this at the start where we think that once we finish school, we've got to get that thing and we're going to be a success. And that's not how it works for 99% of the people. And, we alluded to this, and you spoke about this as well, that when you had finished school, you were trying a lot of different jobs. I think that you worked with disabled people, if that's the correct way of saying it. You became a Pilates instructor. You really tried so many different things. And I know you had, I don't know if it was 7 or 9 years of hardship in New York, but you still kept on going and you obviously felt something. I want to know, like, was that a bit of a relief when you kind of like realized that you were going to be okay? I know you're talking about where you feel like you might not be okay, but you are going to be okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, one thing that makes me think of is, so I did a lot of catering jobs in New York because it was a good actor-friendly job,
Yeah.
and it was pretty easy work and flexible and stuff. Then you have to buy a cheap polyester tuxedo to do it.
Really?
Yeah,
You can buy a tuxedo.
it's just like it's like $70. It's not a lot,
okay.
but it's like a waiter's uniform essentially. Um, and actually, my very first job, I had my tuxedo. You had to go to whatever part of town and get this thing. And my very first job, I finally got connected, and it was one of those things like, okay, good, I know this is a good job. And I got my friend hooked me up with this caterer, and I was heading to this museum, wherever the job was, and I get there, and my pants had fallen out. So I didn't have my pants, and I had spent, it was like $50. It was a lot of money, I was like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? And so they gave me a different job. They didn't put me out on the floor, but then I had to spend more money for that. So I had this real attachment to the uniform. And I was in New York for 9 years, and I came to LA to run the UCB theater, to be the artistic director, which was a big step up. And I remember having my catering costume, or call it costume, because I used to travel with a bunch of costumes too. Wherever I moved, I would have my costume, but I have my catering uniform, and I was doing some sort of purge. And I remember looking at I had already been in New York or in LA at this time for, a couple of years, and was working. I was like I hadn't had to have any kind of real job, but I had a real like, oh, can I get rid of this catering? Can I get rid of this catering uniform? What if I need this? And I did, and that was like a big thing of like, I'm giving it to Goodwill, getting rid of it. I'm cutting that off. And that felt really scary and great,
Of course, yeah. That's a special moment though, because we're underplaying that there were some hardships for you, and I think you felt lost when you're in New York and you're dabbling yourself in different things. And I think Pilates instructor was something that you were pursuing. But then to have that moment where you move to LA and you can hand over a thing that had kind of been keeping you like aloft.
Yeah.
That's a real special moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely was it felt like, all right, we're burning this bridge, I mean, you can buy another.
You can.
But it was a nice moment.
And why did you decide to like continue or move to LA?
Well, I was in New York I'd been in New York for 9 years, and like I would say those last, I don't know, maybe 2 or so, or especially, were just particularly hard. It was a grind, it was a real grind. Just kind of just scraping by, not many acting jobs. Some of my friends were starting to move to LA, and I the way I say it is that I kind of felt like, man, if I'm in New York for 10 years, I'm going to be in New York for 20 years, and I don't know. I saw myself like, there's a lot of New York weirdos. There's like, and I catered with them, and I see them around, and you have these like 55-year-old people with 20-year-old roommates, and it's like, but I have this great 5-floor walk up, and there's a laundry next door to me, and it's all, New York really makes you, it's like an abusive boyfriend sometimes, where it's like
I like that.
kind of shitty to you, and tells you you're not worth much, but if it shows you any kind of love, you're like, oh, thank you so much.
That's a great.
But I just sort of felt like, if I don't leave, I'm going to be a New York weirdo and just be kind of stuck here and always looking for a better apartment and this and that. And the UCB was opening up, and I knew that they needed an artistic director, and I just asked.
Were you teaching
classes?
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, this would be a totally separate administrative kind of thing. This was a more supervisor type role, and being the face of being in charge. And I just kind of was like, I just asked. There's been a couple of moments in my career where I just sort of went out of my way and asked for it. And I won't say that's not a common thing. I mean, I'm not a hustler usually in that way. And I mean that in a good way. I admire people that can put themselves out there and hustle and stuff. I'm not like that. But I just sort of said, hey, if you guys need somebody, I'd like to be considered. And they said yes. They were happy to hear it. So I was very lucky in that I got to come to LA with a job. And a good job. It was a very difficult job, but it was great. It was an amazing, experience and really good for me. So, but it was a combination of feeling like I felt kind of burnt, and it just sort of felt like New York was becoming a bit of a dead end for me. It just didn't feel like, in a weird way,
time to move forward.
And especially in the little improv world. I was going to say I was a big fish in a small pond. Just in that improv world, I wasn't working enough. I was auditioning. I just wasn't getting jobs, paid work. So, I just needed a new thing, to try something different.
I think that's very cool. And I think it also takes courage to do something like that as well, because New York is kind of, or definitely at that time would have been seen as their place, maybe alongside LA. So it could be scary to try something different. I know that you got the job, but it's still scary to move. Did you care? Yeah. You're like, I just have to do this.
Oh no, I was really scared. I was crying the night before I left, and honestly, it felt like a little bit of a failure. It felt like, oh, I'm giving up on this thing. Because to do it, I had to admit that it wasn't quite working out for me in New York.
Yeah, which is hard.
And the whole, the way that I saw it and is like, if New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And I didn't make it. I didn't, I had other friends who got cast on big shows and made it in New York, but I survived. I made it in the sense of like, I survived. I finished that fucking screenplay, as shitty as it was or whatever. And no, it was very scary. It was a big, but it was a good, you get in your routine and your ruts, and it was really good for me to have to start over and be in a different thing and learn a new set of skills. And I definitely felt more than I should have. I felt like I was in over my head as this artistic director.
Sure.
Not to downplay that, it is a difficult job, but it's not, I didn't have a ton of confidence in myself. And it was good to think, to sort of dive in and get in over your head. It's like, okay, how are we going to make this work? We got to make this work somehow. Again, I can't do it, but if I did do it, how would I do it?
That is awesome. And also, just to add to like part of your story, New York also gave you an opportunity to become a very good improviser as well, which has led into your huge success in your career. But in terms of that confidence, did it help with your confidence long term?
Doing that move? Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And also the job.
Yeah. I think it did. Because, when you end up any task that you don't think you can do, and then you end up doing it. It's I don't know. There's a lot of things that feel sort of impossible. It makes me think of like, we moved during the pandemic, and when you move and then you have to find the new routes, the new driving routes, and how much time it takes, and you fuck up, and then when you're in trouble, oh fuck, I'm never gonna make it, and then cut to 2 years later, and exactly the roads to take. I mean, that's pretty amazing when it becomes second nature, especially when in the beginning you're just flailing around. And yeah, for sure, it gave me confidence. But I think you kind of, I don't know, I feel like you kind of always have to find that next thing, that not in the sense that you have to be hard on yourself and never sort of accept like, oh, okay, I'm at a good spot, but
to grow
in the same way that, like, say that again.
Is it about like growing and improving?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you get good at a thing, unless you got to find new little nuances in there to keep it stimulating. I don't know. Yeah. Like, again, I look at it now, like I heard a great quote from, the writer George Saunders. He wrote amazing Civil War, Land in Bad Decline, really funny short story writer. But he has a book about writing, and he has a quote that I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is like, at a certain point, you have to sort of juxtapose the artist you want to be with the artist you are. Meaning, and the way he was describing it is like, when I started out, I wanted to be like Hemingway, or I wanted to be, I wanted these tough short sentences. And then the thing that he ended up writing that got him a book deal and success was he just wrote for fun. It was kind of silly, and he was sort of embarrassed by how easy it was. And he just but it made people laugh, and he liked it and stuff like that. And, I auditioned for dramatic stuff a fair amount, but I don't know that I'm a dramatic actor, and I still want to work on that.
Yeah,
but I think now I'm like, I'm not going to try to get those jobs, but I would like to do a play someday, or I would like to, but I think I'm not going to spend the extra time fretting about those auditions, because maybe that's not my lane right now. So
you're kind of like going with the flow, recognizing what you're good at, and doing that while trying to improve. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
One thing I've also noticed, and this is a huge credit to you, and I'll speak it out loud and see how it sounds. What I've noticed I know you sent me your list, but I have my own list as well. And in a lot of the jobs, it looks like you've worked with people that you either know or you're friends with. And I think that's so cool. Not all, but some. And I'm sure just going through like improv and meeting people, obviously you have to be good. No one's just handing you a job. I think that's really cool that you've also found a way to like earn a living through collaborating with friends. Can you, can you speak to that? Because that's the goal, that's the dream.
That's the goal, that's the dream for sure. You know, and I think like I think a lot of actors probably agree with this, that most of the jobs I get are not through auditions. It's through knowing people, and you know, I've heard other people say that, you know, the entertainment business, it's a business of relationships, and you know, I think that people, in my experience, people, they want people that are reliable and pleasant to work with, you know. They want to know that you can get the job done and that you're not going to be a burden. Like all of these movies and shows they're difficult, moving pieces, and they just want the day to be fun and easy. And if you can provide that, they're psyched, you know. And I feel great because I've been a little bit on the other side of it, where it's maybe my show or I'm working on the show, and you know, so I'm very honored when people just ask me to do something, and it's also usually that they get what I do and appreciate what I do, and that's, I think, when I end up doing the best work is, you know, I'm a very cheap date. If you tell me you like me, I'm like, oh, great. And I do better, you know, I do better. And with auditions, it's tough because you're always kind of like guessing, well, what do they want? Blah, blah. But when they ask you, you know that they want you. And, you know, that's the trick, of course, that you bring to auditions, is you just are you no matter what, and you're putting your own spin on it. But, man, those things are few and far between. And that is the dream, is you work with, whether you knew them beforehand or not, but if you work on something, I always think about it like this, like if you can work on something that's good, or with people that are great, or that is successful, you're killing it. If it's any combination, one of those things is great. If you get one or more, amazing. If you have all three of those, that's the dream. That's the dream, you know.
You've had that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also, I don't know, I cut you off. Go on. Sorry.
Oh no, and because there's plenty of people that are on successful shows when they're miserable, or a person. There's a, you know, one. It could be any job, but whatever. It's a great gig, and there's one person who just fucks it up and is, you know, like not cool, and makes the experience unpleasant for people. And you know, it's that's what I mean. It's a great thing if you can get combination of those good kind of gigs.
It kind of also goes to like a philosophy that I believe in, like your success is my success. So if you're working with your friends or even people that you know of, if they're going, not that you're doing it for egotistical reasons, but if your friend becomes creates their own show, or maybe someone you know of someone who creates a show, you're more likely to maybe work with them. And so it also forces one to be happy for them. Yeah, we can be jealous, like, why don't I have that show? But when your peer group improve or grow or get a show, then that actually impacts you in a positive way. It doesn't negatively harm us. It's very easy to be jealous and all of that stuff. And it's nice to know that it looks like from the outset, and I know I think some of your friends have been on this podcast as well, they'll get you for things because they know you can do the job. They know you're easy to work with, and, you know, they've seen your stuff. So I think that's also the goal. Obviously, you know, you said that you want to maybe book more auditions, and that's a work in progress, but it's still so nice that just you know, having fun and playing improv, because it's something that you really felt inspired by, has led to so many opportunities. And you probably weren't even thinking about all of that at the start as well. You're just doing something that you liked.
Oh yeah, totally. It makes me think of, So something I think about my friend John Ross Bowie, who would also be great for this.
He's been on this. I love him.
Oh, he has. Oh, perfect.
He's
okay.
actually a great supporter of me and the podcast, so I am very grateful to him.
Oh, yeah, he's the best. Well, one thing, and I think about this a lot, he talks about I don't know if he said this or not, but as a sort of litmus test or goal of your career is, steady work in the respect of your peers. If you can get that, that's pretty huge, especially as a character actor. We're kind of journeyman tradespeople. So yeah, that's one of those sticky quotes that I think about. And
he's got a lot of words of wisdom.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
What we're going to do now to wrap up the podcast is, firstly, that springs to mind, but if you need time to think about it, that's completely fine. Ready to go?
Yeah.
So I'm going to tie in a few points because I've written, I think, 200 points. So we'll see how we go. What has teaching improv done for you as an improviser and also outside of improv?
I would say it's, it just reinforces some of as an improviser, reinforces the basics, mostly listening. And a lot of times you see things not to do. And also it's exciting when you see somebody who's got the thing and is sort of, one of us, for lack of a better word. When you see somebody who's like, oh, they get it. They've got funny bones. That's really exciting. What was the other part of it?
And what it's done for you outside of improv.
And I think, outside of improv, I guess, certainly makes me think, makes you a little bit more patient with people. And also I don't teach much anymore, but I used to be very kind of precious about it in the sense of like, not just if you're not good, why are you bothering? But just sort of like, I was very protective of it. And if I felt like if people didn't have the right intentions, it bothered me, it pissed me off. Mm-hmm. But I have a lot more leeway for people who want to do it just because it's fun, because I think it's good for you.
On that, and I'm sure you've seen this, and I've spoken about this as well, but I still think it's important. My first level 1 class, half, maybe more than half, we'll just say half the class had no comedy or acting aspirations. They're doing it purely for them. And I didn't understand at the start. I look back, I'm like, wow, they completely changed as humans for the good. I was like, that is epic. Like, it changed their relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
I know you briefly spoke about this, but what has meditation done for you as a whole?
Well, again, I'll say it's that on the whole, suffer less. Like, to just, it's like quieting some of that extra noise that's, whether it's self-created or whatever. It just kind of, well, this is very cheesy, but there's that podcast about meditation, 10% Happier. And I think it's true. It's like, it's not a, there's a lot of things that are thrown around of like, you got to do this. This is going to change your life. I say that's about right. It's like, if I'm in a groove, if I'm meditating in good periods, I'm meditating twice a day for 20 minutes a day. Usually It's more like once a day for 20 minutes a day.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. And so it just makes it a little bit better, which is huge.
10% is a lot. Even 1% is a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good answer. And what does Funny or Die do for you and your career?
Well, the immediate one is it validated me, because I was made me feel validated. Sorry. As the artistic director at Upright Citizens Brigade, that's kind of it's a great job, but it's a little bit of a middle manager job. So you're not necessarily a creative. You're put another way, you're not talent. You're kind of managing talent. Yeah. So it made me feel good that they thought I was funny. They hired me as a writer.
You were the first writer, right, to be hired?
I was the first technically that they hired just as a writer. They had like Jake Szymanski was a writer, director, creator, and Lauren Palmagino became she was their second employer, I think, who's a director now. But then it also just, it's one of these things that it exposed me to a bunch, and a similar thing that UCB had done where it made me realize like, oh, I can hang with these people. I can, I'm working with these big stars or these big celebrities, and they think my idea is funny, or if I'm acting in it with them, I can hold my own. And it's one of those confidence boosters that I would say not even necessarily boost makes it feel like it's something that's not there. It's just sort of like, oh no, I belong here. I'm this is right. I'm contributing to this, and I'm part of this thing, and I'm helping. I'm one of the things that's helping it along, and that was great.
That is the goal and my dream and desire. So I appreciate you bringing that up. This is going to get you into a lot of trouble. Funniest person you've worked with?
Wow. That I've worked with. There's a couple that jump to mind. I didn't know him well, but the comedian John Witherspoon? I think he's passed. He was in like Next Friday, some of those Ice Cube movies, Friday Night or Next Friday Night or whatever. Older, like Chitlin Circuit stand-up. I think he's passed. I mean, that dude he must have been 70 something when I worked with him, and he was on fire, hilarious all the time.
Oh, no.
I think, God, that's a tough one. It's funniest person I've worked with. I'm gonna say this just because he was on my mind too, because I there's a lot of people I could pick, but John Gemberling is an improviser, which he was on Broad City, and you'd probably recognize him if you saw him. I did this show called Bajillion Properties, and he did a bit on it that still makes me laugh out loud to this day. Just somebody, he's like a guy that's just like dripping with funny. He's like fucking funny in his bones. But then there's, of course, like Brian Husky is a guy that just always makes me laugh. Nick Kroll. I mean, these people that are just sort of so effortlessly hilarious. And it's weird because sometimes a lot of these people are my friends that I know from real life. So some of the love that I have carries over for them when I see them work. But
cool.
Yeah, but it's really tough to just pick one.
And then probably equally as tough, who's the best improviser you've ever seen or worked with?
Tim Baltz. Tim Baltz is like I think he's the best improviser I've ever seen.
That is,
and I'll say this too, like, he doesn't do it anymore, but Adam McKay, I first knew him. He was a writer when I started doing UCB. He would do Ask At, and he was a writer on SNL. But man, oh man, I mean, was that like, what a mind, like him. And then I would say Ian Roberts, who also was one of the founders of the UCB.
Yeah, that's right.
We would call him the Machine, and he is just like a ridiculous, the effortlessness that he can just pop into a premise and just go and go and go and go and go with it. But as like contemporaries, Tim Baltz is somebody who I just he worked on Bajillion Properties, and I was always blown away by him.
You've inspired me to go back to acting, into improv class again. Last few. I saw this on your IMDb that you got a special thanks for Borat #2. Can you explain that to me, or what that was about?
Yeah, well, so I had worked with him on his Showtime show, this prank show, which I don't remember what it was called.
Is this Sascha Baron Cohen?
Yeah, Sascha Baron Cohen. And basically they brought me in to kind of like practice ideas. So I would improvise, here's the scenario, we're thinking about this bit. And we did that on Borat, but honestly, a lot of times, like, he's brilliant, but he's got a brilliant person's mind, meaning he's doing a bazillion things at once. So sometimes I would go in there and I would just kind of sit around for a couple hours and we would never actually get to the thing. But there was a couple of things, and I helped audition some of the people that ended up being his daughter in Borat 2, which was, man, amazing. It's so interesting too, because there are certain people that I was like, oh, she's amazing, she should do this, and I didn't audition. I didn't work with the initial auditions with that woman that became the daughter. But it just goes to show you, it's like how many things can work, because when you see the end product, it's like, oh, she's amazing. It couldn't have been anybody else. But if you would ask me, of the 3 or 4 that I saw before that, I'd been like, oh, this one is, they have to go with this one. So yeah, I just kind of helped. I think of it as like, I kind of sparred with him and, just played the voice of reason to practice what's this going to be like in the real world. And by the way, there's so many for both of the show and the movie. I was like, they're never going to get away with this. There's no fucking way.
Yeah.
And they did it.
Wait, you also talk about Who is America, because even like getting the rooms for some of the politicians, I don't know how he's not in jail. It's just,
oh God. Oh yeah. And man. One of the things I love about this business is it takes a ton of people, and the good ones are really, really good. His producers are really, really good. The way that they can get to people and they can so confidently maneuver because there's that whole separate world of PR people and the managers of your Rudy Giuliani's and your this and that's, and knowing how do we legally get in here and how do we have ourselves protected. It's incredible.
I'd love to chat to him one day as well and just know like how many death threats he gets, because I know he gets a lot, but conversation for another time. I'll do the last few. What was it like working with Larry David?
It was great. He laughs a lot. He giggles a lot. He breaks a lot. Super validating. That wasn't a job that I got from an audition, which
nice.
I really appreciated. And he is giggling and breaking right from the get-go. Everybody thinks that he's really that guy. And I think, I ran into him in real life once or twice, and yeah, I think he's kind of shy and nervous, so he's a little bit that guy. But he's not as much that guy as you would think. But it was great. It was really fun. And again, one of those things that I think, he just, I got the sense that I made him at ease, because he's like, oh, I don't have to worry about this kind of a thing. We got this covered, so then we can just kind of coast and we can cruise. This is going to be an easy work afternoon in this regard, which is great. So in that regard, you kind of, that feels good, and it makes you do better.
He's the only one that I ever talk about as actual names, because I find him an interesting character, but good for you to be able to create that atmosphere. Last 3 questions. What are you most proud of?
Work-wise, career-wise?
Life.
Oh, I'm proud of being a father. I love, love, love being a dad. It's the
nice.
Absolute best thing in the world. Yeah, that's what I love.
Great answer. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps are a bit fearful of doing so?
I'm feeling this pressure to be profound, but I feel like I would just say, just dive in, just make a mess. That's a note that I used to give in improv class. I was like, make a mess, just start, just get out there and do stuff. And yeah, that's what I would say. And the other thought, I was listening to somebody recently, and this applies to anything. The only magic bullet is hard work and repetition. that's, there's whatever it is, you get self-help stuff, artistic stuff. Everybody's looking for, well, what's the thing? What's it? There's definitely technique and skill you can learn, but it's just doing the thing over and over and over again. And, find that thing or that way that feels joyous to you, and I think trust that something good's going to come from it. I heard a great quote from this actor who had worked with Robert Altman, and he was saying, and Robert Altman was saying, "You're doing a great job. Just enjoy this. I might cut you out of this movie. You don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. This may never see. So just enjoy this. Just enjoy today." And I think whatever it is, the thing you're doing, if you can try to, you have to have a goal in mind to create momentum, I think. But if you just dive in, make a mess, and flow with that action, I think that's a good thing to do.
That is brilliant. That's going to be the theme of the podcast, and that was profound. I think that is a great way to wrap up the podcast. Before we go and ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, what is the one question I should have asked you?
Oh boy, what's the one question you should ask me? One question you should ask me. Oh, I guess, and I don't have an answer for this, but how I define success, or has that definition changed over the years? I only say that because I was thinking of things that I might be asked.
Well, I think you kind of have answered, because you've been forced to change. We spoke about New York, for example, of how you thought that was potentially that you were a failure doing that, but then you put yourself in a better position to succeed. You also mentioned how you thought that the one thing would be the thing, and then something else has happened. So I think you do have an answer. Does anything else spring to mind on that?
In terms of what questions you should have asked, or?
No, in terms of how you'd answer that question.
Oh, no, I think you kind of nailed it. It's that definition of success, I think, has to be sort of personalized. And I say that meaning, I think most of us, when we think just about anything, when you think about success, you think about material things and attention on you.
Yep.
And it's really unrealistic. It's like any kind of sort of like self-help thing, a lot of philosophies or whatever are geared towards feeling happy all the time or feeling good all the time, which is actually a pretty insane, fucked up thing to say that you can give out, and is a fucked up thing to want. And that, to try to be the Hollywood front of the magazine success it's not real. It's not real. And so many people measure their success on that. Am I one of the 5 most successful people on the planet? It's insane. It's insane.
I agree. I think it's very important, because that's what people see, but they don't see that there's probably like 50,000 other actors there and doing so many other things as well.
Yeah.
It's important. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and all of that cool stuff?
The most immediate is, so I have 2 Instagrams. I have Seth Morris, which I don't use that much, but the one I use more often is Real Bob Ducca. And
nice.
I'm gonna try to pursue that one more, because it's
use your teeth. Fun. You can use your teeth now as because
I can use my teeth.
Yeah,
that's a good idea, dude. Yeah.
And please, we're speaking off air, but please go on TikTok. I think you do really well with that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I need to dive into that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You're a legend. I really appreciate this, and you've encouraged me to go back into improv. But yeah, we'll have to do this again. But I thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate you, and thank you for doing this podcast, and thanks for having me on. I think it's a great thing.
I love Seth's quote on making a mess. Often when we start a project or an idea, we want it to go perfectly, and sometimes this can even prevent us from moving forward. Seth encourages us to just give it a go. Give it your all, and who cares if it isn't perfect? He also goes one step further to help those on the journey towards success and inspires us to work hard, focus on repetition, and go with the flow. Sometimes in our moment of madness, when we may feel that life is getting on top of us, remember this quote that Seth references. As long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. It's simple, yet effective, and draws us back in the moment. Lastly, I'll leave you with this epic quote by Christopher Moore, whose worldview ties in with Seth's. Life is messy. Would that every puzzle piece fell into place, every word was kind, every accident happy, but such is not the case. Life is messy. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.